Can y'all hear me? All right. Oh yeah, I can hear myself now. I don't know. I don't know how I preach after that, but well, good morning. Yeah, happy Palm Sunday. And so you may be looking at this and wondering what I am talking about, right? Because my ADHD brain kind of comes from left field sometimes. But I obviously don't mean like the animal goat. I mean greatest of all time, right? And so if you remember back a few months ago when we talked about the difference between being a fan and a follower, we had talked about the greatest of all time in each sports category. And so similar to that, we are going to talk about how Jesus was the GOAT of service, right? So most of y'all are probably like, yeah, I know that, Rob. Cut a salute to Captain Obvious, right? But what does this have to do with Palm Sunday? I'm glad you asked. So we're real familiar with the celebration part of Palm Sunday, but there's arguably a more important and deeper lesson to be learned by Palm Sunday, and that's service. See, when Jesus came to earth, he took everything that we thought and knew about greatness and service, and he flipped it on its head. All the preconceived notions that the society brings and stuff like that, he basically said, he ex-nayed them and said, that's not how things go. This is how you do it. As a matter of fact, he said, if you want to be great, start by serving. So I wanted to, before we get into the meat and potatoes of everything today, I had something that I actually learned. If you could go to the next slide, please. Something I actually learned in this process I thought was really cool. And so when I get into this, I have to be on my P's and Q's because Annette is in the room. But it was really neat. I learned this from Rabbi Khan. But did you guys know that Palm Sunday was actually the very first Hebrew holiday given to Israel? A lot of people think it's Passover, but if you go to Exodus, if you can go next slide, please. But Exodus 12 talks about it through verses 3 through 5. And in 3 it says that all the households of Israel, it's a command, all the households of Israel are to take a lamb into their house, right? And it talks about the time frame too. It talks about the month of Nisan, which if you don't know, is the first month in the Hebrew calendar. And then it says on the 10th day of that month, Nisan 10th, which is the day of the lamb, you're to take a lamb into the household, and it gives the criteria on how to pick that lamb out. It has to be a year old. It can't be blemished. It can be from sheep or goats. It gives all of that. And then we know later on in verse 6 that on the 14th day of the month, which is Passover, you're supposed to take the lamb, slaughter it, cook it a certain way, and spread the blood on the doorpost, which we have the Passover. So I thought this was interesting because when you fast forward to the New Testament and the celebration is going on, you have at the same time the celebration is going on and Jesus is coming into town, you have all the households of Israel that are bringing lambs into their house at the same time that God is bringing the lamb into his house, Jerusalem. So, right, I know, right? That's what I thought. It's almost like God knew what he was doing or something. But, so, Palm Sunday is a story of Jesus going into so we could come out of. So, if you have your Bibles, if you'll turn to Mark chapter 11. And now this is recorded in all 4 of the Gospels, but I chose Mark because Mark words things a little bit different. I like the way he words things. He uses a lot of adjectives and adverbs, suddenly, all of a sudden, all at once. He puts more emphasis on it, and he does put a little more emphasis on the obedience part of service in his declaration and his version of what happened, of the events. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So, and I'll stop periodically because there's a lot of symbolism in this. There's a lot of things that have a lot of meaning I want to explain. But so it says, as they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage in Bethany at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 of his disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and just as you enter it, you will find a colt tied there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here." So I want to pause right there real quick. Did anyone pick up on like a small miracle right there? Anyone pick up on? No? How many people have grown up around horses? What happens when you have a horse or a donkey or a mule and it's never been ridden and you try to ride it? Yeah. Yeah, they've got rodeos to watch stuff like that. Yeah, it does not want you on it. Yeah. So I noticed that and I was like, wait a second, this donkey was obedient. It's never been ridden and it was obedient. So it just stuck out to me. So he says, untie it and bring it here. He says, if anyone asks you why you're doing this, say, the Lord needs it and we'll send it back shortly. If you could go to the next slide, please. So they went and found a colt outside in the street, tied at a doorway. Remember that, that's kind of important. As they untied it, some people standing there asked them, what are you doing untying that colt? They answered as Jesus had told them to, and the people let them go. So here's another small miracle here. So donkeys back in the day were not just transportation, they were used to carry loads and pull loads. They were basically the equivalent of like the modern day pickup truck. And so what Jesus is asking his disciples to do, essentially, and keep in mind, like human nature has not changed in 2,000 years, right? He's asking them to go to someone's front door and take their pickup truck, and when they come out and ask what they're doing, say, hey, bro, don't worry about it. Lord needs it. That's what he's doing. Which, I don't know about you, but here in Texas, you do something like that, you may meet the Lord prematurely. So that was another thing that stood out to me. These people were just, everything, I mean, of course, everything works out. God knows what he's doing. But it was awesome to me how all of these things, these small, minute things, details worked out for this story. If you could go to the next slide, please. So when they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their cloaks over it, he sat on it. Many people spread their cloaks on the road while others spread their branches that they had cut in the fields. So now, we know that these are palm branches, right? Here's the meaning for this. Palm branches have symbology in two different things in two different cultures, these two cultures that are merged in this story, right? In the Roman culture, palm branches symbolize victory or being victorious. So it's kind of like a Super Bowl trophy, right? And then you have the Jewish culture that's completely different. Palm branches symbolize peace and fulfillment, symbolizes that God is on the move. So here's what's cool. As they're waving these palm branches, they are simultaneously signaling in two different categories, two different groups of people that God is on the move. In other words, God's getting ready to do something, and whatever he's getting ready to do, he's going to be victorious at it. So I thought that was really, really cool. So it says, those who went ahead and those who followed shouted, Hosanna, which if you don't know, Hosanna means save us now, right? They were under Roman oppression. They were looking for Jesus to free them. Shouted, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our father David. Hosanna in the highest heaven. So can you imagine for a second this scene from the donkey's perspective? Right? You know, the donkey's coming in. They're throwing stuff down on the ground. They're shouting. They're yelling. Everyone's going wild. Yeah, it's never been ridden, right? If that donkey had Instagram, he'd be posting like some of these young kids that you see some of the videos and stuff that they post where, you know, they've got this and they're showing everything behind them. And he's like, bro, the donkey would be like, check this out. Look, they're throwing stuff on the ground for me. Like they're shouting at me. Like Jerusalem loves me. I should probably start my own ministry. But here's the thing. The donkey isn't the point. The donkey was just carrying Jesus. And sometimes as Christians, we can be a lot like the donkey. We serve and we forget that Jesus is the whole point. So there's a few different things that we can learn from this passage, but for the sake of time, we'll just hone in on three of them. So if you could go to the next slide, please. But the first thing that we can learn is that service changes us. Service not only has incredible power, but it protects us from selfishness too. When we serve, it literally changes our brain. And psychology, modern day psychology, has recently discovered this within the last, 10, 20 years, they've discovered this while the Bible has really been teaching this for over 2,000 years. So we got another case of where science is catching up with the Bible, right? But what they've discovered, and there's a bunch of research out there you can read yourself, but what they've discovered is when we engage in acts of kindness, if you could go to the next slide, please, it does several things to our brain. It releases dopamine, which is a happy signal, right? Happy chemical. It reduces depression. It lowers stress hormones. It increases life satisfaction. It strengthens relationships. This is actually such a common occurrence that psychologists have coined a term for it. They call it the helper's high. And what it is it's when we literally get happy when we serve. And the reason for this is all because we're designed to serve. That's what we're designed to do. Just like we're designed to worship, we're also designed to serve. So when God asks us, or not ask, when God commands us to serve, He's not trying to steal our joy. He's actually trying to protect it. So I want to do an exercise with everybody right now. I want everybody to close your eyes. Everybody close your eyes. Don't fall asleep, though. If you fall asleep, I'm going to throw a box of tissues at you. But I want everybody to picture a time when someone in their life has served them when they needed it most, when you needed it most. Picture that time. And so right now, that person, their image should be coming up, all the things that happened. Maybe it was a teacher back in the day. Maybe it was a doctor or nurse, or maybe it was a friend. Maybe it was a complete stranger, right? Whoever that is, those people in those times should be coming to mind right now. And you can picture that, right? You can picture those things. You remember that. So you can go ahead and open your eyes. Here's what I'm getting at. Our society is so inundated with information from the time that we grow up to the time we die, right? In school, we're learning all of our reading, writing, arithmetic, and stuff. When we get into adulthood, there's all the adulting things we have to remember with family and bills and jobs and everything else. We are bombarded with information. And scientists guesstimate that we only remember about 20% of everything that we're exposed to in our lifetime. So there's a lot of things that you've forgotten over your lifetime, even if you haven't been here that long. But you remember those times when someone served you. You remember those times because it left an impression on you. It's actually what psychologists call an impact event. So those type of things that we have had done for us change us for the permanent in many different ways. So that leads us to our next point. If you could go to the next slide, please. And that is service changes other people. So think about those times that we were just thinking about, those acts of service that were performed for you and what impact those had on you, how they changed your life. And they may have been some things that were seemingly small and insignificant, right? My air quotes are going up, and I'll explain that in a minute. But these seemingly small and insignificant things could be something like someone encouraging you, or they said they believed in you, or they were praying for you, like just happened up here. Maybe someone was there for a shoulder to cry on, or someone was just sitting there because you needed someone to listen to you and vent, right? Things that the world says is seemingly small. Those type of things have changed us. They change other people. And what happens is when you do those for other people, it helps them to develop a greater empathy for what's going on in other people, but also for circumstances and struggles that they haven't ever been through. Not only that, whenever you serve somebody, it begins to open their heart up. If you think about it, it's really hard to be mad at somebody or not like somebody or not listen to somebody when they're doing something nice for you. So what happens, if you can go to the next slide, please. What happens is as you do those quote unquote small acts of service, right, it has great impact over time. The ripple effects go out just like if you throw a rock in a pond, right? And eventually those ripples engulf the whole pond. It's the same exact thing. They have impact over years and even over eternity if you're doing kingdom work that we will never be able to understand. Just like Lexi was talking about, those conversations that Pastor Pope had with Lexi that were probably seemingly small, conversations, and he may not have thought that anything came out of it, and yet it's going to have eternal impact, right? That's the type of impact we have on people when they serve, and that's how it changes people. If you'll go to the next slide, please. Service also shows us that sometimes what's most important is least impressive. Serving isn't always glamorous. It's not always fun. It's not always cool. It's not always like high visibility and look super important according to the world standards. But serving is always powerful. Have you ever noticed how the Bible rarely, if ever, celebrates celebrities? You guys ever notice that? Yeah, all the big prominent people in the Bible, but it always celebrates servants. So when I was doing my air quotes and the small and what that is, the world has this idea that certain things, when it comes to active service and other things, that certain things are small and insignificant. They don't really matter, right? It's not going to make a big difference, right? Which I believe, I'll try not to get on my soapbox, I believe is the height of arrogance. For us to try to determine as people with our little finite 8-pound brains what is significant when it comes to eternal standards is wild to me. We have no idea how these seemingly small acts of service are going to impact people later on. But the world says that stuff like, holding a door open for somebody, or, helping somebody move, or volunteering at church or something like that really doesn't mean much. Now, I want to take a second to a little shout out. Now, before I want to caveat this, the leadership in this church notices everybody that serves. I'm telling you, not only is it a small church and you can't not notice it, but we notice that because it means a lot to us. When I see you guys around the church in different positions serving and stuff like that, it makes my heart smile, honestly. But I want to give a specific shout out right now to the ladies that do our food on Wednesday, because that is one of those things that the world would consider insignificant, and it's kind of in the background, and it seems like nothing's really happening. They're just doing it out of obedience. But I can tell you, I can promise you, from being saved long enough and being a Christian long enough, that has massive kingdom impact. So again, who are we? Yeah, absolutely. Who are we to say what is small and what is not? Right? It's very arrogant. Sending a text message to someone to say that I'm praying for you. This has personal meaning to me. Some of y'all know what I've dealt with my health in the past. And in my worst times, when I would lay in bed or nights and all I could do was hurt, and my body would literally be on fire, and I would have this dark, dark cloud of depression over me, I would have people in this church that would send me messages. Hey, how you doing? Hey, thinking of you. Hey, you doing okay? Hey, I'm praying for you. Or they'd send me little prayers and texts and stuff like that. Seemingly insignificant, I can tell you it was not, because it meant everything to me, knowing that I was not alone in that fight, and then there were other people that were thinking about me, and they were fighting with me. So there's nothing insignificant about that. What about smiling? One of the things I really like to do, if you don't know, smiling is contagious. So one of the things I like to do when I'm out in public, like at the grocery store or something like that, is I'll smile at people. And not like a, you do that and you're going to scare people off, like a nice smile, right? They already think I'm weird enough, but you smile at people. When you smile, it actually triggers your brain to release endorphins. So when you smile and you smile at somebody else, you're triggering their brain to release endorphins. You're actually helping them to feel better. So you can see how that changes things. I've had people, which really blesses my heart, I've had people over the years who have stopped and said, you know what, I really appreciate that. I was having a horrible day or a horrible week, and that really helped shed some light on my day, like lightened up my day. I really do appreciate that. So, and then I have other people that just turn around and run. But here's an example that you guys, everyone pretty much knows in here, and if you don't, I'll kind of explain. But the little boy who gave his lunch, feeding of the 5,000, right? which we know is really more like 15,000 because they weren't 5,000 when they were only counting men and stuff like that. So if you don't know, real quick, this massive crowd was following Jesus. And they'd been following him for a while, and they got hungry. So the disciples and Jesus were trying to figure out how to feed these people. And so they were up in a huddle and everything. They're trying to figure this out. And this little boy comes up and offers literally his Long John Silver's Happy Meal. 2 fish and a few loaves, right? And Jesus takes that and he multiplies it. And not only does he feed everybody, but they have a bunch left over. So put that same story into worldly standards and what should have happened by the world, right? You've got the adults like huddled up, right? They're all trying to figure it out. And the little kid comes up and he's like, he offers his lunch and they're like, oh, Timmy, hey, little Timmy, that's good. But look how many people there are, buddy. That's not going to feed everybody. You know, what's that going to do? Hey, but that's sweet of you. Hey, go sit back down with the kids and let the adults figure this out, right? Which is what should have happened by world standards. But what happened instead is that little boy heard the calling of God. He was obedient. And we're having a mass exodus here. But he heard the calling of God. He was obedient. And because of that, Jesus was able to take his small, insignificant gift, right? His small, insignificant act of service and do something far greater than what anybody imagined with it, right? Can you imagine that 2,000 years later, that little boy would think about, hey, people are going to be talking about me giving up my lunch 2,000 years later? But here we are, right? Small act of service. What about the woman with the coins, the widow with coins? 2 coins, right? Worldly standards, right? She comes, he gives her two coins, and they're like, ma'am, look, do you realize how many millions of dollars we've received this week? Listen, I know your heart's in the right place, but look, you need that more than we do. Hey, don't worry about that, But yet, not only, again, are we reading about this 2,000 years later, Jesus himself commends this widow. All because of small acts of service. The woman pouring out perfume, right? We could go on and on. And what happens is when we put our acts of service in the hand of God, it may seem small, it may seem like nothing's going on, but it's up to God. God is obligated to take that and do what he wants with it, and he can do way more with our small little act of service, right, than we can ever do on our own. So it's not up to us to determine what's small and insignificant. It's just up to us to be obedient. Palm Sunday reminds us that the kingdom moves forward through ordinary small acts of service. So I have a little object lesson that I wanted to do with you guys. I am. I got to find ways to keep the youth engaged and stuff because they start, I normally have about a 15-second time span, so I have to get creative. But so this crown represents everything that the world views, and you could go to the next slide, please. Everything the world views as greatness, right? This is what the world says greatness is. Words like fame and winning and money, popularity, social status, all that type of stuff. This is what that represents, right? This is what the world says is greatness. And what we do, mistakenly, is we wear those things and we say, look, I possess one or more of these criteria, therefore, I'm worthy of being served. I am great. By worldly standards, I am great. Because look, I have these things that the world says equates to greatness. I see that. But the problem is, I'm going to take this off because it doesn't fit. I already have a hard enough time getting Stacy to keep her hands off me. So, the Bible says you should not cause a Christian to stumble. So I don't want to give her any lustful thoughts. But no, if you believe that, you're crazy. But anyways, on a serious note, this represents, this is what we walk around with in society, in the world, and say, look, this is what matters. This, serve me. And we make it all about me, and I. We make service completely self-centered. right? Whereas Jesus says, you want to know what service looks like? Service looks like this. This is what greatness looks like, Jesus says. This is serving and humility, kindness, putting others first. Jesus says, you want to be great? Start with this. As a matter of fact, you guys realize that up until the night Jesus was taken, he was serving. He was washing feet. And not like regular feet, but like smelly, dirty, stepping in camel poop feet, right? The night before he was taken. He should have been, he should have told the disciples, hey, look, guys, you have no idea what I'm about to go through. I'm about to be put through the ringer. Look, shop's closed tonight, guys. Sorry. I need to chill out. I need to relax. But instead, he chose to spend his last few hours of freedom in service. So I'll close with this. It's a story I heard about 3 months ago that really touched me. It was about this little boy, and he had cancer, late stage cancer. And the cancer was beginning to take everything from the little boy. And the hospital knew that the little boy didn't have long to live. The parents knew that. The little boy himself knew that. But the hospital was making a very valiant effort to prolong the days of this little boy and give him as much quality as they could. And the parents were there as much as they could be, but they had other things that they had to, life went on. They had to take care of things, dropping siblings off and going and home and taking a shower, getting food and stuff like that. So they couldn't be there all the time. But one day, the little boy was in there by himself, and a nurse happened to walk by and noticed that the little boy was sitting on the edge of the bed, and he was looking out of the window. And the nurse could tell that he was in thought, and so got curious and asked him. She said, "What are you thinking about?" And what he said to her crushed her heart. He said, "I'm worried I'm going to be forgotten." So the nurse walks in and sits down beside him and tells him, "Look, you will not be forgotten. Your life matters." And so she began this relationship with this little boy, and she would stop in, many times a day by himself when the parents were there. And, they would talk and they would laugh and cut up and stuff like that. And then sometimes she would just stop in, when the parents weren't there and just sit in silence so he didn't have to be alone. A few weeks later, the little boy passes away. And the parents wrote a letter to the hospital. I'll read part of it. It says, "We'll never forget the nurse who served our son when she didn't have to. She carried Jesus into our hospital room." Listen, guys, when Jesus rode into Jerusalem, he showed the world that God comes to us through servants. And today, Jesus still does the same thing. Through ordinary acts of service, ordinary people. It's because God loves using ordinary people to carry extraordinary purposes. Take the donkey, for example, right? He could have come to town on a horse or a chariot. He could have had a parade following behind him, but he chose a plain, ordinary donkey, like the economy vehicle of the time, But it's because God loves using ordinary things, ordinary people. And if we're obedient, we can be one of those ordinary things that God uses to bring Jesus into someone else's life. That's all I have, Pastor Marty.